The NBA season has finally ended. And before we get started into our playoff push, I got to address a couple things I was right about, and unfortunately, a lot of things I was wrong about. Start with my man behind me, Jordan Poole. What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Unparalleled Sports Talk. As always, I'm your host, Kwame Fisher Jones. And before we get started with a lot of things, I want to address, in the industry that I'm in, a lot of times people like to hang on to the things they're right about and fairly address the things they're wrong about. And shout out to Colin Cowherd. He came up with one of the greatest segments I've ever seen in television and the radio called Things I Was Right and Things I Was Wrong. So we're going to piggyback right off of that and get right into it. The number one thing I was wrong about going into the season, this NBA season, was Jordan Poole. I thought Jordan Poole would be an all-star. He was not. I thought Jordan Poole would lead the NBA in scoring. He did not. He was an abomination. He was an atrocity at times. He was abysmal. He was all the A's you could think of, but I'm not ready to bail on him just yet. But if for the sake of the argument, for the sake of the segment, I will definitely say he was a disaster. He was a couple missed shots away from being a couple made shots away from being a disaster. There were times he was awful. But the highlights you're watching behind me are all the good times of the season. And as the season wore on and he got comfortable in his role, even moving to the bench, you started to see the player that shined in Golden State. And I'm not willing to bail on him for his career or even for next season. But for right now, he was definitely a disaster. But Washington in itself is a disaster. Jordan Poole's a couple missed shots from being a disaster. The Washington Wizards franchise is a complete embarrassment to the league. And I feel like you get Jordan Poole in a better franchise, with a better organization, with some better players, with better structure, and this will be the player that we see a lot more of. But we'll start off this segment with things I was wrong about, and Jordan Poole was number one. Next. I was right about with the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat was struggling this season, struggling mightily. They're not the team that a lot of people think they are headed to the NBA Finals. But one of the things I was right about going into the season was that they needed to make a major move. And I suggested that they traded for Zion Williams. But there were rumors to get Damian Lillard, and when it happened that Damian Lillard wound up going to Milwaukee, the Miami Heat were then kind of stuck in neutral. But eventually they made a move and they got Terry Rozier, which is a good player, but I don't think he'll be a major difference maker going into the season. And for a Heat team that last year kind of played into the play-in and then found its way in the NBA Finals, a lot of people are expecting or predicting that same type of performance. But with a record of 14 and 24 against the top 16 teams in the NBA, meaning those top 16 playoff teams, the Miami Heat are not headed that way. The record of 14 and 24, the Heat needed freshness when they got Terry Rozier, but they actually need an entire blow up. Playoff Jimmy is a lie. And yes, he plays well at times. He's a fantastic player, but is he a guy that can lead your team to an NBA Finals? People say, well, he's already done it. But let's look at the situations that have allowed him to get there. Better yet, we'll save that for the NBA playoff projection, which is coming up later. But we're going to keep this one in the section for things I was right about. Next thing I was wrong about, the Boston Celtics. I picked the Boston Celtics to have a rough NBA season. Figured they would finish in the top four, but lose in the first round. Turns out they have the number one record in the NBA, 60 plus wins, wrapped up the number one record, number one seed, best record, top, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Wrapped it up in the beginning of April, but I'm no April fool. I'm not buying into this team. But I was wrong. They've had a tremendous year. Jason Tatum was, slid into a couple MVP conversations and slid right out. It's neither here nor there, but they're a good team. And they proved me wrong. Porzingis had an outstanding season. He was terrific as a third option. Jrue Holiday gave them everything they bargained for, so much so that they gave him an extension. But come playoffs, I'm still expecting this Boston Celtics team to be the Boston Celtics team that we've all come to know and love. The team that falls short when you pick them to win, whether it be against the Golden State Warriors in the NBA Finals or against whenever they see the Miami Heat, who they might just see in the first round. And should they lose in the first round to Miami Heat, I will be right back here wearing this shirt in this seat, ready to say, Told you so. But I digress. Boston Celtics proved me wrong in another segment. So far we got Jordan Poole and the Boston Celtics. I don't think I'm too far behind the eight ball on things I was wrong about, but let's jump right back to things I was right about. Next up on that. Another thing I was right about was two things here, twofold. First, I picked the Atlanta Hawks to be a disaster this season, and they were. Picked them to be a walking ish show, and they were. They traded John Collins early in the season, I want to say prior to the season starting, and they were not a good team throughout. While they're going to be playing in the play-in, they should be playing out and looking for a whole change. Quinn Snyder, no one, the roster, the team doesn't appear to be interested in playing for him. They don't look motivated to be playing for him. And I don't know these dudes personally, but they look like they don't like my man either. But that was easy. That was low hanging fruit. Everyone kind of picked the Hawks to be a mid level, maybe a fringe playoff team, but close to the lottery. So I don't get no kudos for it. But the team they're playing, I want some love for this. Pick the Indiana Pacers to be a playoff team this year, to fight for home court advantage this year. They did all of those things. They were one of the top scoring teams in the NBA. They were playing, and for a team that's young, with a guy playing with his contract and Pascal Siakam, for this young team to run into a first round matchup with the Milwaukee Bucks, a team they had to score less than 120 points against, I look forward to watching it. Well, we'll save that for the playoff prediction. But the list of the number one offensive rankings for the Indiana Pacers is too long to mention. From field goals, field goal attempts, 2-point attempts, they get up and down the court in pace. They're second. They're a fun team to watch, basically because of Tyrese Halliburton. While I didn't think Halliburton would be as good as he is, I did think this team would be as good as they were. And I think they left more meat. I feel like they left a little bit more meat on the bone. They could have been a top 4 seed. But either way, their annihilation of Milwaukee put people on notice. They're playing to the inaugural in-season tournament where they lost to the Lakers, announced the presence of Tyrese Halliburton as a player that everyone needs to be paying attention to. They're the young team that people should be watching this year. There are a lot of teams out there that are posing, but OKC in the Western Conference and the Indiana Pacers. And when you think about it, Benedict Mathurin didn't play too great. Obi Toppin didn't play too great. It was Miles Turner Jr., Pascal Siakam, and Tyrese Halliburton. So this team should be one of the better teams going into the playoffs. They'll be one of the harder teams for the Milwaukee Bucks to deal with, and they probably could shock the NBA landscape and put an end to Doc Rivers' coaching career. So we got two more things I was right about, two things I was wrong about. Unfortunately, we're going to go right back to things I was wrong about. This one hurts my heart. This is not, I don't mind being wrong because it shows I'm taking a chance on thinking outside of the box. I take more satisfaction in learning new things. And I learned something this year. This dude doesn't exist anymore. The Ben Simmons that I fell in love with, pause. But the Ben Simmons who I thought would be a tremendous player, the Ben Simmons who I thought would be a franchise-altering, transcendent, all-league, future Hall of Famer, no longer exists. And Ben Simmons is gone. And at the beginning of the year, I thought he would lead the Brooklyn Nets to the playoffs. Thought he would be a fringe candidate for comeback player of the year and possibly make an all-star game. Nah. The Ben Simmons I got playing back here, look at that. Able to get to the hole, able to blow out people, finish with authority, gets the ball open to the open players, gets out in defense, one of the best defenders, one of the best closeout defenders, and three-ball feeders is gone. This dude is a shell of himself. He's not even a shell of himself. He doesn't exist. And the Brooklyn Nets have decided to bring Ben back because they had no choice. They want to trade him. He's got dead money on the cap. He's in the final year of his contract, so there's a chance they may be able to get something for him. But as we sit right now, I was 100% wrong about Ben Simmons from the start, and I'll be 100% wrong for Ben Simmons to the finish. It's over for Ben. And it's over for people like me who believed that there was a slither of that player that gets out in transition, that player who can defend all 5 positions. That player is no longer around us. Ben Simmons, yet another thing I was wrong about. Off the happier time. Another thing I was right about, I called early with the demise of the Golden State Warriors. Now, Full disclosure, as the season waned on, I saw Golden State chants of the freight train regaining on the tracks or getting back on the tracks, and an easy schedule. Um, that lined up for Golden State kind of gave people false hope, self included. But before the year, I said that Golden State would struggle to even make the playoffs. They did. Before the year, I said Golden State would have a problem adjusting to the new Klay Thomas. They did. Before the season, I said that Jonathan Kuminga would be a sporadic player that'll show you flashes, but eventually get lost in the smoke and mirror. He did. So here we sit. Golden State is the 10th seed about to play the Sacramento Kings, one of the more disappointing teams in the NBA also. And it seems like this is more than just something I was right about. It seems like this is more than something, just a regular play-in team of a veteran team, so holding on hope. If the Orlando Klay Thompson rumors are correct, and that's where Klay is headed at the end of the season, we could be watching the end of one of the greatest runs in NBA history. We could be witnessing the end of a team that changed the way the game was played, and not just the way it was played, but the way it was taught. The way the Golden State Warriors implemented ball movement, the way the Golden State Warriors implemented the outside shot, not just three-point shooting, because when they won the titles, they were never the number one three-point shooting team in the league. But the way they implemented the three-point shot into their offensive arsenal changed the NBA. It changed the way teams are playing in college, going all the way down to AAU. We won't. We've already kind of seen the end of Steph Curry as we know him. He has every once in a while, he has one of those tremendous lights out games, but they're few and far between. There's moments, his magnificence is interrupted often by sustainable moments of mediocrity. That makes sense. But the leaving of Klay Thompson, if he is going to go to Orlando, but the fact he's no longer in the starting lineup, pretty much kind of, I mean, we had to do all season with Klay's not the same. It's Draymond's fault. I did a whole podcast. Everything was Draymond's fault. Everything was Klay's fault. No skills in college is Draymond's fault. The bad drivers, that's Klay Thompson's fault. The high gas, high everything in play, that's got to be Draymond. Like everything was their fault when it wasn't. The reason why the Warriors have fell off, the reason why it was obvious that they fell off was for two reasons. Number one, you can't miss out on high draft picks. Number two, you can't miss out on high draft picks. They missed on Kuminga and they missed on Wiseman. And because Steph Curry took longer to develop, people keep holding out hope that Kuminga will develop. But as I've said before, hope is not a plan. And you're sitting here waiting for Andrew Wiggins to be the isolated player that he was in 2001 or in 2001, thinking of AI, when the Warriors won the title. But you're getting the Andrew Wiggins that you've had throughout his career. A player with a docile game that doesn't play with emotion, kind of goes through the motions. He gives you a lot of ain't my fault numbers, gets lost on defense, oftentimes doesn't close out, oftentimes doesn't anticipate, oftentimes gets caught out of position. And it killed the Warriors. And you combine that with James Wiseman over LaMelo Ball, which no one wants to talk about. For whatever reason, they didn't draft Ball. And it could have been off the court. It could have not wanted to build LeVar. Whatever the case may be, this team with a LaMelo Ball is a completely different team. This team with a LaMelo Ball instead of Chris Paul, with a LaMelo Ball and a Jordan Poole is a completely different team. And then the Kuminga and Moody selections, they haven't developed. Yes, they've given you great games, but they haven't put together a great season yet. And now you're going to be forced with having to pay. I'm going to go out on a limb right now and say, if I had to pick one player to be traded this offseason that is more likely to be traded, I would say it's going to be Jonathan Kuminga. Because the Warriors can't continue to send in the luxury tax for a dude that may or may not develop. So it's just bigger than just being right about the Warriors. There's a certain sadness in watching one of my favorite players, Klay Thompson, one of my favorite players is Draymond Green, being hung out to dry for a front office organization. One of my favorite players, two of my favorite players being hung out to dry by a front office and organization that has dropped the ball time and time and time and time again. So yes, this is something I was right about, but unfortunately, it was something I was right about. Next up, one of the things So as I said, Golden State was one of the things I was painfully right about. This is one of the things I was joyfully wrong about. The Luka and Kyrie pairing. I didn't think Dallas would be good this year. I thought they'd be okay, possibly playing in the play-in. But Dallas has been tremendous this year, and it's been because of this dude behind me. One of my favorite players to watch, one of the more exciting players in the NBA. He gets way too much acclaim. The acclaim does not match anywhere near the achievement. However, what Kyrie has done this year, they've got the sixth best record in all of the NBA. That's a testament to Kyrie and not Luka. Yes, Luka has been tremendous, but Luka's been tremendous before, and Dallas hasn't done anything. It was when Jalen Brunson played well that Luka was managed to kind of sneak into the NBA Finals. And now you got a Kyrie Irving that's been playing unbelievable. Unbelievable. 58 games this year, which is a lot for Kyrie. But they were 39 and 19 in those games. But the big thing that makes me excited for Kyrie and excited about being wrong about this was Kyrie played in 8 back-to-back games this year. And those games, he had his highest scoring output in the season, 27 points a game. So that means he went out and played in the games that he normally would sit out in, and that he normally wouldn't play with it because of a soft tissue injury or whatever the case may be. He managed to come out, not only play, but he balled out. He had a tremendous year. You didn't hear anything negative about Kyrie all year, and I'm happy about that. And I'm happy about being wrong about this. I don't know what they'll do in the playoffs. The Clippers are a tough draw for them. Luka's had success with the Clippers, but Kyrie was close by Ty Little. And hopefully Kawhi Leonard is healthy, so we'll see what he looks like. But for the meantime, final thing I was wrong about. Another thing I was wrong about doing there, I talked about Ben Simmons. I said Daryl Morey would be working at a Walmart next year. Maybe not next year, but he should be blowing up his LinkedIn portfolio. Anyway, Kyrie Irving and Dallas Mavericks, the last thing I was wrong about. Finally, the last thing I was right about, and something I'm really excited to point out. Finally, the team I was right about, I'm excited about, I love being right about, were the Houston Rockets. Since the Houston Rockets would be in playoff contention this year, they were. They finished 41-41 at 500. The first time they finished 500 or better, or at 500 in 4 seasons. They were one of the better, more exciting teams in the league, specifically because of this man, Jalen Green, who had a low, high. So they went on an 11-game winning streak throughout the season. They were 3-1 against the defending champions. A lot of good things to be excited about in Houston. And I saw it coming down the road. Adding Fred VanVleet, who went to Fred Van, I didn't say that. Adding Fred VanVleet from Toronto, adding him allowed them to get some stability and explosion at the point guard position and some shooting. A guy that was a quality professional that would give them effort. Instead of going with James Harden, was Ime Udoka's best move of the season, best move of his career. And for him to land on his feet in Houston, start out slow, and then get rolling is exciting. It's good for basketball and good for him because he was on a raw deal in Boston. But I digress. The things that they've got to work on. 14-27 in a row, which is a sign of a young team. They go out on the road, they party, all the Instagram chicks they've been connecting with, they get to meet up with. So that's the big thing. 14-27 and 4-10 in back-to-backs. Those are the 2 things that Ime will look at, the organization will look at, and get better. And they'll add some more veterans going into the season. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say Houston will be contending for a top 4 seed in the Western Conference next year. And I have no problem saying that. Jalen Green, they're tough. They're nasty. Between Jalen Green, hopefully Jabari will get better this offseason, but if not, he'll be on the trading block. I love the Thompson kid. I think he's one of the best young talents to come out of that point guard position. And the backcourt of him and Fred will be good to watch. Jalen Green is one of the best young scorers in the league. Houston's gotten it right. And amazingly, as I mentioned Daryl Morey, amazingly, they did it without having to create a whole slogan. They drafted talent. A lot of their players are late draft picks, or guys that weren't top picks, weren't first overall. They built a basketball team. They added Jeff Green in the offseason, another veteran. So they're headed in the right direction, and they finally cap out the things I was right about and the things I was wrong about for this upcoming NBA season. If you like the podcast, make sure you share, subscribe, comment, do whatever your podcast platform allows you to do. And as always, I appreciate your time of year. You be easy.